sports podcast that has nothing to do with sports. Joining me, as always, to my right is Austin Curveball Gray.
Thank you for having me. Feels good to be back, even though it's our first podcast. Appreciate it.
We are at home base here, Camino Real. Really excited. But before we get started, we want to thank our episode sponsor. Our episode sponsor for this episode is Surfing Yogurt. No shirt, no shoes, no problem. Surfing Yogurt. Coming right off the beach, grab your yogurt. Austin, you want to tell us who we're bringing into the bullpen this week?
I would love to. It's one of our closest friends and one of our faithful youth workers, and she actually loves sports. She is the national checkered champion, I think, back in 2008, and she also is wearing a beautiful Dodgers hat. She actually got that at the Dodgers World Series. I'm going to throw up a picture here.
That, right?
You'll see she was just cheering in the crowd. But welcome, Rachel Link.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
So happy to be here.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
Yes.
it feels good that you're here. How are you doing?
Great. I'm so excited to be here. Got my blue on,
Yeah,
my trusty bat.
yeah.
I'm ready.
Your matching blue chair.
Yeah.
I see you. Dodger fan right here.
Yeah, I bleed blue.
Nice. We got a couple questions for you before we start.
We like to start every podcast, although this is our first, with a GOAT debate. Debate. This week's topic is, what is the greatest of all time Ventura breakfast burrito? The greatest of all time
burrito.
Ventura breakfast burrito.
There's a lot of different options you have here,
Yeah,
but
I'm racking through my brain, but I think I'm just going to have to come down to the good old-fashioned Corrales bacon breakfast burrito.
And what makes it so special? What makes it the GOAT?
You know, it's the mix of the beans and the cheese and the crispy bacon and the fresh cracked egg wrapped up in that warm tortilla. You just can't go wrong.
Austin, would you agree that the Corrales burrito is the GOAT?
I did for years. For years it was Corrales, but it was about a couple weeks ago, and I had to go to Tacos Mendoza, and that was one of the first times I had a breakfast burrito and did not feel sick and tired after. It was just fresh. It had a lot of bacon, a lot of cheese. It was great.
More like a
Good hot sauce.
farm-to-table breakfast burrito.
Yeah, it was really good. It felt like it was just healthy too.
I agree. I'm going to go with Tacos Mendoza as well.
Nice,
Not only is it
nice.
centrally located in the east end of Ventura,
Yeah.
but what it lacks in size in comparison to the Corrales burrito, it makes up for in bacon and potato wealth.
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
it's a very like substantial burrito. I feel like really where the only place you can go wrong is having too much egg, right? And so they replace that with a lot of bacon, a lot of potato. If you've never tried Tacos Mendoza, I highly recommend it. Get it with the bacon. Tell Kevin Brian said hi. Tacos Mendoza.
Yeah.
I'm going to say the GOAT breakfast burrito in Ventura.
There you
Our
have it.
next segment on the GOAT podcast today is really just an opportunity for us to get to know our MVP guest. So this is where Austin and I ask a series of questions that she or he is not prepared for to just try to get to know them a little bit before we get into the real content of the day. So Austin, why don't you go with the first question?
Yeah. So, Rach, we just want to know, what has been your favorite movie or show since quarantine?
So I would say my favorite, drum roll please, Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton. That's what I'm talking
How many
about.
times have you watched Hamilton in quarantine?
I will say that I only watched it once,
Oh, okay.
but I have
So not a
listened to
true
the
fan, Not a
soundtrack.
true fan.
I have listened to the soundtrack from beginning to end at least 10 times.
Fair.
So
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rachel, why is there fuzz on a tennis ball?
well, it's actually, not a lot of people know this, but it has a lot to do with the aerodynamics of the sound that the tennis ball makes.
Ooh.
So without the fuzz, it hurts your ears.
That's a
Wow.
That's a great
Wow.
answer. It
Yeah.
feels scientific and accurate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
100%.
I love that. If you can go anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Oh, I would go to London, England.
Nice. Why?
This answer better not involve Harry Styles.
There's
Or it could.
multiple reasons. I'll name one. Just, I really want European pastries.
Ooh.
So-
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
If you were an animal, what animal would you be and why?
ooh, this is a toss-up. between a horse, a free wild horse,
A Mustang?
or a dolphin.
A free dolphin?
A free wild
Okay,
dolphin.
Nice. Clarify.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna be a dolphin at SeaWorld. Sorry.
Ooh.
And why?
Well, because horses just run free. They have beautiful manes, and I just love the spirit of a horse. Dolphins, I love the ocean, and what are dolphins called? Like the ocean's
The ocean's
best friend or something?
dog or
Yeah,
something.
the ocean's dogs.
Right? Something like
I
that.
think it's something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. My next question is, sell me this chapstick.
Wow, sales, my worst nightmare. Burt's Bees, coconut and pear, because who likes eating your fruits when you can put them on your lips?
Wait, I would buy the chopstick. I would.
I would too. It's currently melting out here, but I'd still
Yeah,
buy it.
nice.
Burt's Bees. We'd love for your sponsorship.
Yeah,
I'm glad we got to just find out more about who you are, what you care about,
absolutely.
and where you're going to go, which is London. I appreciate
Mhm.
that. Well, let's jump into it. For our first ever podcast, we actually asked you guys, our students, what are some of the topics you guys want to talk about? And you gave us tons of ideas. And so one of the most important ones we wanted to talk about that we are going to title Parents Just Don't Understand. But let me jump it over to Brian. You can explain a little bit
Jump
more.
it over to Brian.
Let's just hop over to
Hop
Brian
on over.
real quick. And can you explain a little bit more about what you think we should run through?
Yeah. So the idea came about parents just don't understand really from this collision of wanting to be obedient to like the fifth commandment, right? Obey your mother and father. And yet the reality that so often your parents are like, oh, I get what you're going through. I was 12 once. I was 17 once. And you're sitting there going like, Mom, you don't get it. Mom, you don't understand. Dad, you don't understand. And so how do we live like in that tension? How do we live in that world of like, I want to honor my father and mother. And yet I don't really feel like they get what I'm going through. They understand what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And Austin, you and I were talking earlier on a Zoom call in a youth staff meeting. And I was saying that there's these 3 kids that live on my street in Montalvo. We just bought a house in Montalvo. Don't come to my house. We won't give away candy at Halloween.
Address below, address right here.
But they live on my street, and they have a lemonade stand, and the sign above it says Charlie's Organics. Charlie's Organics. And so I walked by the other day. I had some cash on me, and I was like, "Hey, I don't want lemonade right now, but I'm gonna give you $2. It was 50 cents a glass.
Nice.
I was like, I'm gonna put $2 on account with you. Tomorrow, when I walk by with Pax, we pull him and his wagon around the neighborhood every afternoon. When I pull Pax by tomorrow, I want some lemonade. The next day comes, I pull the wagon by, and they're not there. And I'm like, man, I gave $2. I got $2 on account with Charlie's Organics, and they're not here. Later that afternoon, they come to my house. They knock on my door, and it's Charlie and his 2 business partners. They're probably like 11, 12 years old.
Okay.
And he goes, hey, we wanted to deliver your lemonade. And I said, cool. And he said, just in case you want to know, we changed the name. And I can't remember what they changed the name to. And I said, why did you change your name? I love Charlie's Organics. And this 11-year-old said, well, we realized that we couldn't own the domain for Charlie's Organics, or we couldn't trademark it. We couldn't own the domain or trademark it. And I'm like, well, that's brilliant. And B, what 11-year-old is worried about
I was
owning
just
the
about to say
domain
that.
space and
I know.
trademarking their lemonade stand? When I was like 10 or 11, I had a lemonade stand, but I was never worried about trademarking it or buying the domain or, owning the kind of moniker, logo, whatever.
Yeah.
All that to say, we're all growing up in a different world than our parents, right? My parents never worried about owning the domain of their lemonade stand, but these 11-year-olds are. So when our parents say, I understand, or I get what you're going through.
Yeah.
Well, there is a degree to which they do, and there's also a degree to which they can't. Which, when we started talking about this a little bit, it led to my first point that I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on, which is don't confuse difficulty with interest. Don't confuse difficulty with interest. Here's what I mean. It's difficult for your parents to understand you. It doesn't mean they're not interested in understanding you.
Yeah.
Don't confuse difficulty with interest. Just because it's hard for them to get it, to grasp it, doesn't mean they don't care. They're trying. And the way I think about this is like PAX is changing every day. Like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we couldn't play blocks because he wasn't there yet. He wasn't ready to connect like the Lego blocks, or he wasn't ready to stack. But just 2 weeks later, now it's like his big thing is like, oh my gosh, Dad, will you stack blocks with me? Will you build towers with me? He's changing so fast that as a parent, I'm struggling to keep up with what he's into today. And I think a lot of Goat Nation will understand, like, I think y'all understand, like, a month ago, maybe we were into like One Direction, but now that's super passe and super stupid, and like we're not into that anymore.
And now
And like it changes so fast that like maybe your parents are like, oh, because One Direction's still cool. Then you're like, no, Mom, that's not cool at all. And they're like, well, it was like a month ago, but now it's not. And so they're trying to keep up. It's difficult, but it doesn't mean they don't care.
Yeah. And I feel like even as things change, you might see that your parents will still try, but although they don't understand, they still want to put the time in. Like they still want to put the effort in trying to understand. And when you're a teenager and you have a lot going on, the last thing sometimes you want is your parent to be involved. But I think even then, they want to be. Like they want to understand why you like the things you like, so they'll try to understand it. Or they might seem like they might know what's best, and you hear that a lot too. I think my parents always said like, well, wait until you're a parent, you'll understand. And now that I am, and even though Sailor is only 4 months, I'm already thinking about those things, and how, man, maybe my dad was right. And so although I wanted to push my dad or push parents away, we might have that thought of like, they won't get it, they won't understand, but really they're just trying to relate.
Yeah.
So I know, I get that. I definitely get that.
And I think to that point too, it's important to allow your parents to ask you questions. I remember when I was a teenager, like you were saying, Austin, like the last thing I wanted to do was sit down and have a 30-minute conversation with my mom about whatever she was asking me about.
Yeah.
But I think when we allow ourselves to just have that conversation, we can find that A, she's not trying to ruin your life or like question every single thing you're doing. She just wants to get to know you. And B, it could be a good time. You know, there's times where I've had conversations with my parents and I walked away and I was like, wow, I was expecting that to be like not super fun, but it actually was like really good quality time. And sometimes we just immediately write that off and then we miss out on that opportunity.
Yeah.
I love that you said that, because when I said like there was a time where like One Direction was so cool and you're not into it anymore, and you rolled your eyes, you're like, no one's been into One Direction forever.
One Direction will never die.
They will never ever die. My point is, we kind of in some ways like sabotage our own interest. Like a lot of times Mom and Dad, like to your point, Rachel, will be like, hey, so who are you listening to these days? Or like, who are your best friends? Or are you dating so-and-so? And you don't open up, you roll your eyes and you're like, Mom, stay out of my business. Or like, Dad, you don't even know the cool bands or whatever. And you sabotage them trying to like relate, trying to understand, because you don't communicate.
Yes.
And so sometimes you like need to seize those moments and be like, okay, yeah, like my dad is uncool and still thinks One Direction is cool, but he's trying, like he's making an effort. He's trying to get to know my world. He's trying to get to know me. And if I hear nothing else than that, let me hear he cares.
Yeah.
Right? And like I hear all the time from parents, like I'm trying, but my kid won't open up. My teenager won't open up to me. And if nothing else, hear that when they ask those questions, it's an interested parent who loves you enough to ask. And so if your parent's asking you about dumb things like that, or things that you're like, oh my gosh, you don't get it, hey, at least understand the win of you've got a parent who cares.
Yeah.
You got a parent who's trying to understand you.
Yeah. The number one question I always rolled my eyes out, my mom would ask me in middle school and high school, mostly high school, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to go hang out with my friends. And she's like, oh, who are you hanging out with? And I'm like, Mom, it's the same people. You know them. Like, don't make me list every single person. But I was thinking about when you were saying that is like, who knows? Your parents don't know every single time you go to hang out with someone if it's the same people.
Yeah.
And that is just a sign of like, oh, who are you going to hang out with? One, they're curious because they don't want you hanging out with weirdos, but also it's like, oh, who are your friends this week? Or like, have you met someone new? And it's just another sign of showing interest and caring about what you're doing, who you're with, what you're interested in.
Honestly, even to like start that conversation with your parents, if you wanted to start that, I'm thinking back in my life, I grew up playing sports and baseball, basketball, football, soccer, and my dad was really into sports. And so we connected on that at a very young age, and I probably grew up with sports because my dad liked sports. But as time went on, I got into other things where I wanted to like make things, and I wanted to like start to like BMX or skateboard, or like I was into like animals and having pets. And although my dad continued to have me play sports or like travel baseball or try to play this sport, once I opened up and told him that I was into other things, his interest in sports and in our relationship we had started to change. It was a different path that we started. And like he bought me my first bike, he bought me my first skateboard. He was into the things as soon as I brought it up. So maybe that's somewhere where you guys could be, and it can be something where you bring it up first, and the shift in that nervous feeling you had where your parents are going to be upset with you, or they're trying to they think you still like that band or that group, or you're into that could change as soon as you bring it up.
Yeah, I totally relate to that.
definitely
I mean, I was never a sports child. Still am not a sports adult.
Except for checkers.
Well, yeah, except for checkers.
Oxnard Checkers champ.
Yeah, don't
right.
forget. But my dad really, really wanted me to play soccer when I was little, and so I did. I played like 2 seasons, and I enjoyed it kind of, but not really. And he would tell you to this day that I was the worst soccer player he's ever seen. So I finally told my mom, I was like, I don't want to play soccer anymore. And my dad was disappointed. But then as I got older, I got really into acting, and I really liked being in plays, and I started taking acting classes. And once my dad saw how passionate I was about that, he was like so on board, and he wanted me to succeed. He wanted me to keep going after it because he knew how much that I enjoyed it. And even though he wanted me to play soccer, and he was like really gung-ho on like me and my brother playing sports, once he saw that I was super passionate about something else, he was like, oh, okay, I can get on board with this. And so to your point, if your parents want you to be really doing something, whether or not you're good at it or you enjoy it, and you want to shift to something else, if they see your passion, they're going to want you to pursue that as well, because they want you to pursue something that you enjoy and that you love.
I love that. And really what you're talking about is like channels of communication, like your dad getting really into baseball because he saw you really into baseball, or your dad supporting like your desire to like get into acting or whatever because he saw that interested you. And so, I mean, y'all are really lucky, as was I. We had parents who were like, okay, if that's the thing you're going to be into, I'll try to wade into those waters too, so we can connect, we can build relationship, we can have memories and so forth.
Yeah.
So I guess what we wanted you to hear in this first part is really that what you may consider to be like nosiness, what you may consider to be like, oh, just get out of my business, is really a parent who cares about you and is trying to connect with you and trying to value the things you value, love the things you love, and really just want to continue to hear how you're growing and developing and what's going on in your life. My next question, I guess, for you two would be, where do you draw the line between when you're not ready to talk about it and then when you are ready to talk about it? How do you signal to your parents? How do you bring up with your parents? Like an example would be maybe I don't make the basketball team, or my girlfriend breaks up with me, or like my best friend like stabs me in the back and is talking, beef about me or something, throwing shade. What other word can I throw there? Throwing shade. And like I'm really hurt, and I come home and mom's like, what's wrong? And you're like, I don't want to talk about it right now. I think that's fair. Like I think there are moments where it's like, hey, you need some time, you need some space. But there's also a moment where you do need to say, hey, I'd love to talk about this, or I want to tell you that like this is what happened to me. How do you know the difference? When do you finally talk? So forth.
Yeah, I remember when I was in elementary school, I had a lot of problems. I was part of a threesome friend group, and when there's 3 people, I just feel like just bound for disaster. And we always had problems, and our teachers were always talking to us, and every single day my mom would pick me up and ask me, how are your friends today? And I remember being so annoyed because I was like, Mom, just stop asking me about it. I was like, how about I'll tell you if something good happens or if something bad happens? And I actually had to say that to her as like a 4th grader one day. I was like, Mom, please stop asking me about it. Because one, I was already in distress about it always, worrying about it and like feeling, sad or whatever. And so sometimes I just didn't want to talk about it. But I did tell her, I was like, I'll tell you if something happens. How about that? And she's like, oh.
And would you?
Okay.
Like if something big came up,
yeah,
would you?
Yeah. And I also would say that sometimes I would keep things to myself, and in a not so healthy way. either like wait till I'm just like so sad in my room that she would have to come find me, or one time I like wrote in my journal because I knew that she would read my journal, and I'd like leave a note for her. That was more out of
Wow.
anger, but it's like, Mom, if you're reading this,
Little disclaimer.
yeah, but yeah, I feel like it's hard because you don't want to tell your parents like stop asking me about it and then feel like, oh, well, I just like yelled at them, so I don't want to be like, hey, can we talk now? But I feel like sometimes you just have to do that and to just like let them know like, hey, I actually am ready to talk about this, or just bring it more into like normal conversation, I guess, and instead of making it such like a, hey, let's sit down and have this talk today, just kind of like talk about your day and then bring it up. And I don't know, but that's what I would do when I was younger.
I feel like there's like two sides of this of the communication. I think you have to be on a good like relationship with your parents to be able to communicate correctly. Because I think of different times in my life in middle school and high school where I didn't want to have that conversation, or like if my dad or my mom they wanted to talk about something, or they can tell something's wrong. I had to remember that the reason why they're doing that is because they care. They know you so well that something is wrong and that they care about you. So for them to ask you what's going on, why are you upset? What why are you crying? Why do you seem mad? That's because they care. So me being like a punk middle school and high schooler, I'm like, it's none of your business, or I'm like, I don't want to talk about it, and I walk away. I also had to talk to myself and tell myself that that they want to hear my heart and what's going on. And so I had to be okay with that uncomfortable feeling of saying, I don't want to talk about it right now. And then coming back to it and going back to your parents saying, okay, now I want to. There's almost the like embarrassment feeling that something's wrong, or that you're struggling with something. And so you have to be able to be comfortable enough to go back to your parents and say, okay, now I want to talk about it. I need advice. And even though at some point you don't want the advice, or it's not the answer you want to hear, it's still the advice of a parent who cares. And we have plenty of students, and I've had tons of conversations about maybe it's like a stepdad or stepmom that is trying to help, but you're not really comfortable with them yet. That's something you might need to change, or something you might need to feel comfortable talking to them.
Yeah.
Even I think over quarantine, I had a conversation with a student who was reaching out about a little conflict they had with their parents, and how at some point they wanted to make a different decision that their parents wanted them to. They were on different sides, and he's like, I just don't know how to go talk to my parents. I don't know how to bring this up and say I don't want to do that anymore, and I want to go this different route. And he was uncomfortable with bringing that up to his parents. So it really goes back to being bold and knowing that your parents care about you,
Mm-hmm.
and that they love you, and that when you bring that up, it might be uncomfortable for you, but it's going to be worth it because they care about you. They want to be able to walk you through that decision.
Yeah, and I as a tip, something that I've used and that I know a couple friends have used too, if sometimes you have trouble with words, if you don't want to talk about it when your parents bring it up, and then it's hard for you to go back to them, I think a really useful way to bring up that conversation and kind of put it back in their court is to write your feelings down. Like actually like
Absolutely.
write
That's a
them
good
a
one.
letter and be like, hey, can you read this? And then at the end of the letter, like, can you come find me so we can talk about it?
That's
Because
good.
sometimes it is hard to, personally for me, whether it be conflict that's like tension or not, it's really hard for me to bring up something that's hard for me to talk about. And so I feel like being able to write it down and not have to think on the spot can be really helpful.
Yeah.
And so that's just another tip too. If you're like, want to give your parents a sign that you're ready to talk about it, but it's really hard for you to come up with the words, just write it down and give it to them and tell them to come find you when they want to talk about it.
I love that. And that's not like a childish middle school thing. I mean, I remember when Megan and I were dating, and I was like 20, at the time, like 26. And there were a couple of hard conversations we need to have as we were approaching marriage. We had a couple of them that were like, why don't you write all of your feelings and thoughts down about that? I'll do the same, and then we'll switch letters. And then we'd do
That's
that
good.
before we went out on like a date.
Yeah.
And I would have already like read her thoughts and feelings. She would have read mine. And then we would talk. I mean, and we were in our 20s at that point.
Yeah.
So to your point, sometimes it's easier. That's a great tip, Rachel, to express or to be able to express our thoughts and feelings and emotions on paper on our own with no rush.
Yeah.
Like when we're apart from each other, I feel like I need to get them out quick.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I have a pen and paper by myself at night, I can be like, hey, no rush. Take your time, get it all out there.
Yeah.
And then to give that and say, after you read this, let's talk.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. You both kind of got at a soapbox or pet peeve of mine, and then a question. The first is, so often, because you're both great youth workers and great mentors, you get asked all the time about like, hey, what would you do in this situation? And I think that's right. I think that's a good thing. In fact, I only consider it dangerous when teenagers only seek wisdom from each other.
Yeah.
In some ways, that's like the blind leading the blind. Like you
Yeah.
do something dumb, and we all do, and you ask another 16-year-old what you should do about it, another 17-year-old what you should do about it. I'm like, well, they're no smarter than you are. I mean, like, you made a mistake, and they would probably make the same mistake. And so I think the wisest teenagers are those who are like, hey, I want to go to a mentor, someone like a Rachel, someone like an Austin, and say, hey, I'm in this the sticky situation. How should I get out of it? What should I do? But I hope you're thinking about your parents in those same categories, that you're kind of willing to say, hey, I've got the situation going on. Can we talk about it? You're looking for wisdom from your parents, because I know some of your parents, and they're really wise, smart people, and they care about you. And so I'm hoping you're seeking out wisdom, you're finding and getting wisdom from your parents. I can tell now that it's time for the 7th inning stretch, where we get into what we call fast pitch. Fast pitch is where I just throw rapid questions at Austin and our guest and try to get their honest, quick responses.
Let's do
Austin,
it.
parents just don't understand. What do you do when you want to date somebody your parents don't want you to date, or you want to date anybody and your parents have said you can't be dating right now?
That's a very good question. First, I definitely think you should honor your parents. So if they say you cannot date, I think you first need to listen to them. You don't go behind their back and date, because then that's just secretive, and you're also lying to them. I think if you are giving them a reason to trust you, and they do trust you, they might be open to having a conversation for why. But we need to remember that there is a reasoning that they don't want you to date. And I can easily just think back to my parents. In the beginning, they would always ask me, like, why are you dating, or what's the reasoning for it? And they always had a reason why I shouldn't. They were going to be connected if I was going to date. Like, they would know who she is, and know where I'm going and who their parents are, and the connection between that. But I really think that if you are looking to date, or you want to be in a relationship with someone, you definitely need to bring your parents into it, because if you're serious about it, they're also going to be connected to your parents as well. So they're going to want to meet them. Your parents are going to want to know who you're dating, who you're bringing someone into your life. And for those parents who don't want you to date, or for you guys if you have parents who say, no, you can't date, there's a reason. It could be because they know that the temptation could be so strong. They know that it might not be a good idea, or that they might know what's best, and they know from their past or a relationship they've been a part of, and they just want to make sure you're safe and you're doing it the right way, and that they have the same beliefs as you. And so I feel like just parents care. Like, parents, again, going back to the care of parents, they want to be a part of your life. They want to know what you're doing, and they also have authority over you, and so they want to make sure that you're being safe and that you're honoring their rules and the regulations they have, and you live under their house. So it's for you to follow what their rules say.
I like that. And especially just kind of as a general red flag in life. Like, if you got to hide a relationship from your parents, if you're hiding a relationship from like your youth pastors or your core group leaders or mentors, that alone should be like a big like red buzzer, right? Like ding, ding, ding. Something's not right here. And so I think that's a really good answer. That's a really good point. Rachel, what do you do when your parents don't share the same beliefs as you? Parents just don't understand. What if they don't understand my faith? Like, I've made a decision to follow Jesus and they haven't. Or my parents are like diehard believers, but I'm not sure I'm there yet. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it kind of, we've said this multiple times, but just being able to have that open dialogue and being bold enough to have that conversation. If your parent is questioning why you want to go to youth group or why you believe what you've decided to believe in Jesus, I think especially if they're saying that they don't want you to attend youth group, or they want to know what you're doing there, invite them to come one night before, or now over Zoom, you can give them our contact information, Brian or Austin, and just they can talk to them and see what we're all about and see what you've been up to, what you're learning about, and kind of make it more safe for them and to have a little bit more knowledge of like, this is a good thing.
That's good.
Yeah, and for your parents who are strong believers and you're kind of, wavering and not super firm in what you believe yet, I think just being open to their conversations, what they want to talk to you about, and also being willing to say, hey, I appreciate what you're trying to do, what you're saying, what you're talking to me about. I'm just not there yet. I'm not ready. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. Can I come and ask you questions when I have them? But can we put a pause on this conversation? Just to allow yourself and your parents to have some space. Because I know it can build tension when one person is trying to kind of bombard the other with questions and reasoning for things. But just being willing to be open, to have conversations with your parents, and also being like, hey, I need some space right now, but can I come talk to you when I'm ready?
That's good. That's good, Rachel. I like that a lot.
Well, I have one for you. As far as parents don't understand, what do you do when your parents have a different political view? I know it's kind of a big topic right now.
Yeah.
A different political view than what you have.
Okay.
What do you do?
Especially going into, we have a presidential election coming in November.
Yeah.
Here's how I think about it. In my backyard, I have an orange tree, and all of the fruit and all of the leaves are on one side of the orange tree. That's because one side gets sun almost all day, and the other side is in the shade all day. I was praying and thinking in my backyard the other day, we grow towards exposure. We grow in the direction of the things we're exposed to. It's no surprise that you have different political views than maybe your parents. They grew up in a different time, a different generation, and so they were exposed to different things, and those exposures, the thing they've been exposed to, have helped their formulate and kind of solidify their political leanings. You're growing up in a different world. It doesn't necessarily mean one's right, one's wrong. It means you've been exposed differently. And so I ultimately would encourage you, as the scriptures encourage us, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. I think political dialogue is really healthy. Talking around the table, if you can do so in a way that's not heated, in a way that doesn't end up in a yelling match or tearing one another down. I think if you can have good political conversations at dinner table, that's really healthy. And if you can't, I think it's also healthy to say, hey, we just see this differently, and it seems like neither of us are moving, and so it's probably just smart for us to not talk about the presidential election. It's probably smart for us to not talk about DACA or immigration or a wall or things like that, because we just see it so differently and we can't have healthy conversations about it. I get angry or you get angry. So let's just agree we're going to see it differently, love one another, and maybe say those topics are a little bit off limits because we can't engage in them in a healthy way.
Yeah, it's good.
At the end of every episode, we're going to dig into the mailbag and answer a question from one of you in Goat Nation. So let me get into my mailbag right now. All right, let's see.
Wow, it's like Christmas.
A lot of mail for our first episode.
Well, the Little League Goat podcast is already blowing up in Asia Minor.
Okay.
Right. Okay, digging into
Mad
here.
respect.
Let's see. Got a letter here.
I hope it's not for me.
This is from Kevin in Couchilla. Kevin in Couchilla asks,
Sup, Kevin?
Austin, how many marbles is too many to swallow in a day? Please say more than 12.
Ooh.
I think the issue with the whole marble situation that I've seen around on social media is they show how many marbles are going in, but not how many are coming out. So I would just go to your doctor right away. It's like a disclaimer with the marbles. So just make sure you understand that a lot can come in, but you need to count how many come out. So
It's got to be even, folks.
look, good luck. Good luck.
Nice.
Yep,
Well, you heard it here first on Goat Nation.
Before we leave, though, Rachel, thank you for being with us. We want you to sign our game ball. You are the first person to sign the game ball for our Little League Goats podcast, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much. Well, a round of applause for the Oxnard Checker champ, Rachel Link.
Thank
And as
you.
always,
Thank
Austin,
you.
thank you for a great episode of,
Of course.
Little League Goats.
I love it. It feels good to be back on the field.
It does.
You know, feels good.
It does. I was always right over there on the bench.
Oh,
Yeah.
I feel that.
Hey, thanks for joining us for Little League Goats for the greatest of all time. Make sure you like, subscribe, and check us out. We'll be back real soon.